morning. As Dr. Feynman said, my name is Tom Naughton. Unlike the other speakers, I'm not an MD, I'm not a PhD. I am a guy with a degree in journalism who made a popular movie called Fathead, and that was after my career as a stand-up comedian. Fathead led to me becoming a popular health and nutrition blogger. My co-authors Jimmy Moore and Laura Dolson are also popular health and nutrition bloggers, and based on the comments and feedback we get from our readers, I can tell you there absolutely positively is a crisis in nutrition. And to illustrate why, I'd like to start with an old joke. A couple of drunks are sitting in a bar when the 6 o'clock news comes on, and the first thing they show is a man standing on top of a 10-story building. First drunk elbows the second one and says, "Hey, I got 20 bucks," says he jumps. Second drunk says, "I got 20 bucks," says he doesn't. A few seconds later, boo! Second drunk says, "I'm an honest man, here's your 20. First drunk says, "Nah, I can't take your money. I've been drinking here all day. I've seen him jump on the 4 o'clock news. I've seen him jump on the 5 o'clock news." Second drunk says, "Well, so did I, but I didn't think he'd do it again." The reason we have a crisis in health is that, and in nutrition, is that people who are battling obesity and diabetes are being told to make the same losing bet over and over again. And they're tired of losing. And they are starting to lose faith in the people telling them to make that bet. People with credentials who are essentially saying, "Trust us, according to our research, the guy didn't actually jump." So to break it down a little more, here's how we can cook up a big crisis in nutrition with just 5 ingredients. Number 1, doctors, nutritionists, researchers, medical industry, trade groups, government agencies, and other established authorities handing out dietary advice that flat out doesn't work very well for an awful lot of people. Number 2, the same doctors, nutritionists, researchers, medical industry, trade groups, government agencies, and other established authorities insisting that their advice actually does work well, but unfortunately people are too stupid, lazy, or gluttonous to follow it. Number 3, easily accessible sources of alternative advice that ends up helping a lot of stupid, lazy, gluttonous people lose weight, feel great, get their blood sugar under control, at which point they no longer appear to be so stupid, lazy, or gluttonous. Number 4, doctors, nutritionists, research, medical industry, trade groups, government agencies, and other established authorities insisting that the alternative advice that helps stupid, lazy, gluttonous people lose weight and get their blood sugar under control doesn't actually help people lose weight and get their blood sugar under control. And 5, doctors, nutritionists, researchers, medical industry, trade groups, government agencies, and other established authorities insisting that while the alternative advice may occasionally help stupid, lazy, gluttonous people lose weight and get their blood sugar under control, it will also kill them. Now, these 2 ingredients, researchers and scientists clinging for dear life to theories that ultimately prove not to be correct, there's nothing new about that. As Thomas Kuhn explained in The Structure of Scientific Revolutions, once a paradigm is established, the people whose careers are invested in it will fight to maintain it. Or as a couple of psychologists explained in a terrific book called Mistakes Were Made But Not By Me, human beings have an amazing capacity to engage in selection bias in order to maintain their existing beliefs and avoid the psychological pain of just admitting they were wrong. Or as the physicist Max Planck put it somewhat more bluntly, so these 2 ingredients are not new, but this one is, and this is the one that's making all the difference. And to explain why, let's go back to a previous era in world history and follow what is, unfortunately, a very common sequence in the treatment of type 2 diabetes. First checkup, you're overweight and in danger of developing diabetes. You need to start following these guidelines put out by the American Diabetes Association. These guidelines will explain how carbohydrates drive up your blood sugar and therefore you should be basing your diet on them. Next checkup, your blood sugar is still too high and you've only lost 3 pounds. You really need to follow that diet. Next checkup, your blood sugar is getting even worse. Are you sure you're following that diet? Next checkup, you're clearly not doing well with the diet. I'm writing you a prescription. Now, thousands and thousands of people were going through this same experience, but they probably didn't know that. Because back in those days, we could only share personal experiences pretty much with people we knew, family and friends. The health advice we got from the traditional media went through a relatively small number of gatekeepers, and most of them were simply passing along the same old information, the same old advice from the same old experts. I know I used to be an editor at a health magazine, and that's what we did. I called it rounding up the usual suspects. That's all changed now, thanks to the people who brought us the digital age and the people who invented the internet. These days, when people become frustrated because the dietary advice they've been given isn't working, they do what intelligent people ought to do. They go to the internet looking for more information, looking for something different, looking for something that might actually work. And they're finding it. They're finding it in forums, they're finding it in Facebook groups and in blogs of all kinds, paleo blogs, low-carb blogs, blogs that focus on nutrition science, blogs that feature interviews with doctors and researchers, blogs that are written by doctors and researchers, and even blogs that focus on the politics of where our nutrition guidelines came from. The information out there is almost endless. So, what are the people being exposed to all this information on the internet finding out? For one thing, they're finding out about that first ingredient. They're finding out that the dietary advice the experts have been pushing on us for the last 35 years flat out is not working for an awful lot of people. They're finding out that the hypothesis that a high-fat diet causes heart disease was based on bad science from the very beginning. And they're finding out how the McGovern Commission in the 1970s ended up recommending a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet for everyone, in spite of the fact that many of the doctors and researchers who testified before that committee told them they were making a mistake, including the head of the National Academy of Sciences, who said their recommendations were nonsense. They're finding out that Americans have, in the last 35 years, to a large degree, switched to a diet that's lower in fat, lower in saturated fat, lower in red meat, higher in grains and other carbohydrates, but we have been getting fatter and more diabetic ever since. But more important than just the history or the statistics, people going online are finding literally countless personal experiences shared by other people online like these. It makes me so upset when I think of how I used to feed my daughter on the advice of her pediatrician and the government: skim milk, cereal, pasta, bananas, orange juice. Sounds like a school lunch. I was so frustrated because I couldn't figure out why she was so heavy. I was sent to a diabetes seminar by my doctor. I followed the diet, but my blood sugar was never under 170 to 180. When I went back and told the nurse, she said I didn't follow the diet correctly. I would try to fill up on fat-free yogurt and other low-fat snacks and then become even more frustrated when the chubbiness wouldn't go away. When that didn't work, I felt I had no choice but drastic measures like starving myself. I went to our local diabetes center, which tells people to eat a fairly high-carb diet. When I started eating all those carbs, my glucose level shot up and stayed there. I was so frustrated, I quit going to the center for checkups. Well, I went low-fat, 1,000 to 1,200 calories a day. I exercised religiously for an hour every single day. I did weight training. At the end of the first year, I'd gained 20 pounds, and it wasn't muscle. I've been trying to lose weight by simply eating less. I was extremely meticulous about it and only consumed 1,500 calories per day. Week 1, I lost 3 pounds. Week 2, I lost 1 pound. Week 3, I lost 0 pounds. I gained a pound back in the 4th week. My doctors, nutritionists, and nurses all advocated eating quality carbs over refined carbs, but I'd already been doing that. These are the kinds of experiences people are sharing with each other, and once they realize how many other people have been following the standard advice but are getting lousy results, they come to the logical conclusion: this advice is wrong. This advice does not work. And that's when they begin to fully appreciate the second ingredient. They see Dr. Oz telling Oprah that the reason his low-fat diet didn't work for her is that she doesn't love herself enough. They see government experts telling parents the reason their kids are so fat is that they're not moving around enough. Never mind the research showing that kids get fat first, then they stop moving around. And of course, they see the experts explaining that the reason we became fatter and more diabetic after the food pyramid came out is that it was too complicated. The advice was apparently correct, we just didn't get it. I make a living as a software programmer, but apparently the reason I used to be fatter and sicker is that this was beyond my capacity to understand. So if we take this hugely complicated triangle and we replace it with a nice simple circle, now the same advice will actually work. And when it doesn't make a difference, which it won't, we'll end up with the food square, the food parallelogram, the food trapezoid, whatever it takes to just avoid admitting we were wrong. Now, when intelligent people are told to follow a particular diet, and they do follow it, they get lousy results. and the experts insist that the advice actually was correct, they just didn't do it right, how do you suppose they react? I'll give you some examples from online of how they react. It's amazing how the government can take something as simple as eating and turn it into something that requires panels of experts and millions of dollars and still be wrong. What really kills me about this whole thing is the number of doctors I went to over the years, one after another, who told me my problem was a lack of willpower. It's a shame scientific evidence and innumerable real-world examples aren't enough to get the government stooges to change their tune. Now, people are not going to the internet and spending hours and hours there just to vent their spleens. The real reason they're going to the internet is for this ingredient, alternative advice that might actually work. And they are finding it, and not just from the people who write and create the blogs, but from the people who visit them too, because there are conversations going on. I have doctors and PhDs in my audience. They are constantly sending me links to research, as do a lot of other people. In addition to my blog, there's a Fathead Facebook group with almost 2,000 members, and I'm constantly amazed at how passionate and educated and well-informed some of these people are. People come to this group asking questions, and they get really good answers. What's going on here is a phenomenon described in another terrific book called The Wisdom of Crowds, which explains in a nutshell why when large groups of dedicated amateurs share their ideas, their information, and their experiences with each other, they often come up with more accurate answers and more effective solutions than the supposed experts. In other words, getting 100 different answers is actually a smarter strategy than getting one answer from a supposed expert who happens to be wrong. Which is why when I see this, the USDA Guidelines Committee setting a goal of helping policymakers, educators, clinicians, and others speak with one voice on nutrition and health, frankly, I think that's kind of stupid. Manufacturing consensus might be useful in politics, but it's bad for science. So people go to the internet looking for that wisdom of crowds, looking for a diet that might actually work, and eventually they find one. Maybe it's a paleo diet, maybe it's a low-carb diet, maybe it's a diet that eliminates all grains. The point is, people are trying these diets that the experts tell them they shouldn't try, and they're getting good results. Here's some examples from people have shared on our blogs. I went from blood sugar readings of 170 to 230 to readings that are close to or below 100 most of the time. I used the approach of a protein vegetable diet, no fruit, no sugar, no bread or rice. The result was triglycerides, which went from 666 to 140 in 3.5 weeks. Also, fasting blood sugar went from 357 to 103. The chronic, painful digestive problems I was experiencing have almost completely subsided. I went to my doctor this morning who read me my blood work results. She was baffled by the improvements and blatantly asked me what the bleep I did differently this past month. On March 27, I began my new weight loss journey. I'm happy to report that by May 17, my blood sugar was down to normal, I was deemed no longer pre-diabetic, and my blood pressure was in the normal range. As of this writing, I've lost 68 pounds. I wanted you to know I've lost nearly 80 pounds since Fathead made me rethink everything I'd ever learned about food and nutrition. The reason more and more people are going to blogs and social media for diet and health advice is because too many of them are not getting results like these by listening to doctors, nutritionists, and government health agencies. Which brings us to our fourth ingredient. You know, I actually am a health-conscious person. I used to work at a health magazine, and for years, I lived on the kind of diet the USDA told me I should. It was a mostly vegetarian diet, lots of whole grains. I used margarine instead of butter. I ate my grape nuts with skim milk. I used egg beaters instead of real eggs. I ate soy burgers instead of burgers with all that artery-clogging saturated fat. And here were the results of my efforts. I got fatter every year. I had psoriasis and other skin issues. I had gastric reflux and other digestive ailments. I was tired way more than I should have been, and I was showing signs of prediabetes. All that changed when I adopted a completely different diet, what's now called a paleo diet, with lots of meat and other fatty foods, eggs, some vegetables and fruits, a low carbohydrate diet with 0 grains. Now, given that result, what do you suppose I'm going to think? What do you suppose the people whose pictures I just showed you are going to think when the experts try to tell them the diets that are clearly working for us don't actually work? I can think of two possibilities. My results are a mere coincidence, so I should go back to the diet the experts recommend, or the experts are misinformed, pig-headed, dishonest, corrupt, or just plain stupid. Here are some reactions from online. My doctors and diet advisors take the credit for my slender frame and my well-controlled glucose, but I do not do what they say. I've been on this diet now for 3 years. Of course, when I told my doctor this, she said it's a coincidence and I'm just in remission. Thankfully, I'm not going to need to visit her again. I've had doctors tell me that my weight loss, thyroid improvement, skin improvement, etc. on a low-carb diet is just a fluke or an unusual occurrence. It is really scary to think that these are the people in charge of treating patients. It is a sad state of affairs when we have to protect ourselves from those who are supposed to be helping us. The more these experts try to tell us that diets that work for us don't actually do anything, then the more our attitude toward them is sliding down the scale from apathy to suspicion to outright contempt. Here's an example of what happened recently when a certified diabetes educator insisted that diabetics should be on a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet because the USDA says so. The magazine that published her article online was slammed, and I mean slammed, with comments like these. As a physician with prediabetes, I'm appalled that a high-carbohydrate diet continues to be promoted. I'm 56 years old. For the past 5 years, I've maintained normal fasting blood sugars on a low-carb diet. So, you recommend that diabetics like me eat higher carb diets and then take as much medication as needed to keep blood sugar under control. How can that possibly make sense? I am a type 1 diabetic, and I know for a fact what 45 to 65% of calories as carbs can do to my blood sugar. This is absurd and borderline dangerous. I'm going on 6 years of eating 30 to 35 carbs per day. My A1C has been in the non-diabetic range ever since I went this route. This column is not helpful to diabetics and probably dangerous. When experts like this insist that their ineffective advice has to be effective because the research says so, then once again, logical people come to the next logical conclusion. Maybe there's something wrong with the research. Maybe there are a lot of researchers out there deciding ahead of time what their results should be and then designing their studies to produce those results. Perfect example, one I think we saw earlier. This study came to the conclusion that a low-carbohydrate diet makes no difference for weight loss, and the only problem is the low-carbohydrate diet was not a low-carbohydrate diet. Or this study, which again claimed macronutrient ratios make no difference for weight loss, and the only problem is the one macronutrient a lot of us believe can make a difference was the same in all 3 study groups. Studies like these are making people in the blogosphere suspicious. We can't help but wonder if studies are being designed to suit somebody else's agenda. And that suspicion is leading to a phenomenon some people are now calling peer review by social media. People outside the research establishment are enthusiastically analyzing and pointing out what's wrong with a lot of the studies we see out there. Why? Because we see a lot of bad science and we stop trusting the researchers. And we don't want people making dietary decisions based on lousy science. Same thing with the 5th ingredient. If being obese and being diabetic are big risk factors for heart disease, and we go on a diet that helps us lose weight and get our glucose levels back to normal, a diet which has, in several studies, been shown to produce the greatest metabolic benefits, then it seems a little strange to us when other doctors and researchers try to insist this same diet will kill us. It improves everything we can measure, but it will kill us. It also seems strange when our own government keeps insisting that we shouldn't be on this diet. Here are some reactions to the USDA guidelines from online. These scientists are well aware that the dietary fat heart disease paradigm is flawed. At the same time, they have to protect their paychecks from big ag and big pharma. Either the researchers and low-fat gurus are extremely bad scientists and thus their advice is irrelevant, or they have no problem blatantly lying to people and thus their advice is irrelevant. Sometimes I wonder if people making these recommendations even took a basic course in biochemistry and physiology. If they did, they must have flunked or barely passed before forgetting it entirely. And yes, that comment was left on my blog by a doctor. The reason Dr. Feynman invited me to this conference was to explain why more and more people are turning away from their doctors, nutritionists, turning away from government health agencies, and seeking health advice on the internet, in blogs and social media. And I'm sure for some people the first reaction would be, oh my God, people are getting health advice from a bunch of bloggers. How do we put a stop to this? Well, we can't put a stop to it, and we shouldn't want to. because the wisdom of crowds effect is genuine and it is helping people. This ingredient in the crisis for nutrition isn't going to go away. These are the ingredients that do need to go away. If the authorities in medicine and academia and government want to maintain any credibility in the age of the internet and social media, then they need to honestly reevaluate what they have been telling people for the last 35 years and be open to changing their minds. Because asking people to make the same losing bet over and over isn't going to fly anymore, even if those people are drunk. Thank you.